everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Legal Roadmap podcast and Facebook Live show. I'm so excited to be here with our final installment in our series on prepping for your next launch or promotion. So you may be planning a Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale. You may be prepping for a big January launch, maybe something for New Year's, or you just could be, getting ready, planning out an end of Q4 or Q1 2021, new product or promotion that you're working on. So no matter what you're working on, this episode is going to help you get ready for it. Now, my standard disclaimer, this is not legal advice. I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer if you're listening to this. I'm licensed to practice law in Tennessee. Our law firm works with creative entrepreneurs, online business owners, and coaches all over the United States. But this podcast is really just meant to be information. It is not meant to be legal advice. If you have a question, be free. Make sure that you reach out to your own lawyer so you get the best advice for your own business. All right, so this is number 3 in our series about prepping for your next launch or promotion. In the last 2 episodes, we talked about Facebook ads and using testimonials or earnings and results claims in your promotions. So go back and listen to those 2 if you haven't already. There's great information in both of those. Today, we are going to be diving into my favorite topic, what I consider the number 1 legal protection for every online business, which is your contracts. Now, you may think, why do I need to worry about my contracts, Autumn, with a launch or promotion? I'm worried about my Facebook ads. I'm worried about my webinar. I'm worried about getting my funnel put together. And those are all really important. But what I see day to day, I think I've told you guys before, if you've listened before, we work with 7- and 8-figure online businesses every day, and we see behind the curtain. We see what goes wrong. We see where they're struggling or having challenges legally. And I will say 99% of the time, when a challenge presents itself, we are looking at their contracts to figure out how we're going to move through it. It's often an issue with a student in one of their courses, or it's an issue with a collaborator. Maybe someone has stolen their content, but maybe it was someone that worked with them at some point as a student or maybe in their mastermind. So the contracts are almost always where we are starting when we're resolving those issues. So that's why I want to help you prepare and get your contracts in order before those issues pop up. We want to be able to avoid as many legal mistakes as we can. So today we're going to be brushing off your contracts. This is a great time of year to do that. Heading into the holiday season, a lot of us, especially for service providers, get our client load maybe gets a little bit slower, things quiet down a little bit around the holidays, or maybe we schedule some time off. So it's a good time. I know a lot of us put off, we kind of set it and forget it with our contracts, but it really should be something you review and look at every year or so. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing I want you to do is whatever you're planning to promote, whatever you're launching next, if you're doing a special deal, this could be for service providers. If you're doing any kind of special promotion around the holidays or in January, this could be for course creators if you've got a launch or a promotion coming up, and this could be for coaches. So it's really any kind of online business owner. This is relevant to you, so keep listening. Pull out your main contract. So this is going to be whatever contract you use with most of your customers. For a service provider, like a web designer, graphic designer, copywriter, this is going to be your client contract, your client agreement. For a course creator, it's going to be your terms and conditions. We call those terms of use. So that's what your students agree to, hopefully, at checkout. We'll talk about that in a minute. For coaches, it's going to be, again, your client agreement, whatever contract or agreement you have with your students or your largest category of customers. I spoke today with a new client here at the AWB firm who teaches piano. She doesn't use a contract with her clients, but she has a kind of a policies page on her website that she asks them to agree to. So you may have a setup like that. Whatever the terms are or the policies are that you have your customers agree to, pull that out and just read it. Take 20, 30 minutes. I like to print it out and get like a red pen and a highlighter because I'm old school that way. It helps me know where I need to make changes rather than trying to go through and edit it as I'm doing it. I might circle something and say, I want to look at this or I want to think about this. And then you've got kind of an outline. The big things I want you to look for are just to make sure you're still doing business the same way. I think, again, because a lot of us, we write our contract and then we just send it out to clients. We don't review it every time before we're doing a new client engagement or we're launching a new version of our course or starting a new round of group coaching. we may change things and we forget that our contract may not match up with how we're actually doing things. And I have certainly been guilty of this. I am no better than anyone else. We use with our clients here at the AWB firm a contract called an engagement letter, which is just our contract for how we work with our clients. And I try and look at it about every 6 months because we are constantly kind of testing, changing, tweaking our processes a little bit. And every now and then I will look at it and say, oh my goodness, we don't do that anymore. Or, that needs to be updated. So I want you to just brush it off. First thing is just give it a read, see if there's anything you're not doing anymore or that just doesn't match your current processes. Then there's a couple of issues I want to draw your attention to and make sure they're addressed in your contract. And this is not everything you want to have in your contract. I've got lots of episodes about different contracts for different types of businesses, so go listen to those if you want kind of more nitty-gritty. These are really things that I want you to pay attention for around your launch or around your next promotion. So the first one is your refund policy. First of all, you just need to have one. Even if your policy is we don't ever give refunds, that definitely needs to be in there. If your policy is maybe you give refunds for a certain period of time, that needs to be in there, like 14 days after purchase or 7 days, whatever period of time it is, that needs to be in your contract. Some of our clients, Amy Porterfield is an example of this. You can go on her website and see hers. She has a show your work refund policy. So that is basically, she will only give a refund for Digital Course Academy, her main course, if you have gone through the course and you kind of show her that you've tried some of the exercises and they didn't work for you. So you have to kind of show that you've put in the effort before she's going to give you a refund. So if you have something like that that's a little more specific, definitely want to have that in your contract. Now, in addition to just making sure that your refund policy is in your contract, we want to make sure that it matches what you say on your sales page or what you say in a webinar or what you've got, wherever you're promoting your stuff. It could be in a Facebook group. It could be in social media posts. You want to make sure that that matches your contract. We don't want any kind of disconnect between, well, I thought the refund policy was this, but then when I went and looked at the contract, it was something totally different. We want them to match. We want the students or your purchasers to have eyes wide open, to know what they're getting into, and same thing for you, to know what everybody's agreeing to. We all want to be on the same page with our contracts. So make sure there's a refund policy in your agreement, no matter what it is, just put it in there, and then make sure it matches your sales page or however else you're promoting your product or your offering. The next thing I want you to think about is testimonials. Now, last week, we talked a lot about all the special rules about using testimonials. So if you haven't listened to that and you plan on using testimonials or customer stories, things like that in your next launch, go listen to that. Make sure you're doing it the right way. Today, I'm going to talk about what you need in your contract to actually use those testimonials. So there's a common misconception that if a student or a customer gives you feedback or tells you something about your course, for example, maybe the success that they've had or something that they thought was really awesome, and you're like, oh, this is great. This is social proof. This is going to make other people want to buy it, especially if it's someone maybe who's well known or a bit of a celebrity in whatever field you're in. That's awesome social proof. You've got to get their permission before you use it. And this is especially true if you're using their photograph and their name or their business name. Under U.S. laws in most states, you as the person in an image, you have the right to control the use of your own image. That's called the right of publicity. And so if somebody else wants to use your picture to advertise their stuff, they have to ask your permission. Sometimes this is called a model release. The reason I want you to take a look at your contract is that this release or this agreement that you can use their feedback or their posts in your Facebook group or however you received this information that you want to use as a testimonial, you should be asking for that permission in your contract. It's much easier to get it up front than to try and grab it later. So check your contract and see, is there a term in there? If you bought one of our templates, we include that in a lot of our group coaching, online course, in those kinds of agreements, that term is in there. So go look at your contract and see if that's already in there. And if so, you're good to go. Sometimes our clients will edit that and will basically say to their students or customers, I will ask you before I use this. Like, yes, you give me permission, but I'll ask you if I'm going to put it somewhere publicly, or I'll ask you if I'm going to use your picture, things like that. So check your contract and see what it says. Now, if your contract doesn't address this, if it doesn't talk about using feedback or things that they've posted as testimonials, change it now. This is, we're preparing for our next launch. So you're about to, hopefully, with your next promotion, get a bunch of new students or get a bunch of new customers. So if you don't have this in your contract now, let's go ahead and update it so that next time when you have those new people, you'll be good to go. If not, again, if your contract does not have this term or you don't have a separate agreement with them, the best practice is to reach out to that person directly whose feedback or testimonial you want to use and ask their permission. Now, this doesn't have to be fancy. We do have a one-page, a very simple model release on our website if you would prefer to have a really formal legal document. And I would say if you're working with someone high profile, you might want to, get that more formal agreement just so there's no questions later. But for most people, if it's just one of your customers or a student that you've worked with, you could just send them an email and say, hey, I'd like to use this. Tell them how you're going to use it, what you're going to do, and say, do I have your permission to do this? Or can you send me a photograph that you would give me permission to use? You just want to make it really clear, simple. Keep that email in your file so that if there's any questions later. And sometimes these questions do pop up. I'm working with a client now that this has kind of become a sticky issue in her business. So it's important to get that, make sure everybody, again, we just want to all be on the same page. You want your customer or student to know how you're going to be using their feedback or their testimonial. You want them to feel good about it. You want you to feel good about it. We all want to be on the same page. So if you don't have a term in your contract giving you permission to use that as a testimonial in your marketing materials, then reach out directly to that person. Make sure it's okay with them. 99% of the time, they're going to be delighted because it's kind of, you're giving them a little bit of publicity as well. You're featuring them on your website or in your webinar or on your sales page. So most people are happy, and especially if they had a good experience working with you, they're delighted for you to feature them. But always good to make sure that 1% that that's not who you're featuring, and then you get in a dispute later. And again, if you have never used testimonials or never looked at the rules around using testimonials, these are Federal Trade Commission rules. Go listen to last week's episode 164 dives more into all the rules around that. All right, moving on. This is another term that may or may not be in your contract, and that is sometimes it's called acts of God or force majeure or impossibility. This is something that we have really been dealing with in 2020 with the pandemic, with something no one expected, but now has turned our world upside down and we're all having to deal with it. So look at your contract and see if there is a term that is called, any of those things, acts of God, force majeure, impossibility is what it's usually called. See if you have anything in there that addresses what would happen if something unforeseen comes up. Can you cancel the contract? Can the client cancel the contract? Can you change the deadlines or scheduling if you need to? We have had so much change and things, with this pandemic. I think I'm recording this in late October. It's airing in November. I think we'd all hoped that we would be past it by now. We are not. We don't know how much longer it's going to go on. So I think the possibility that you or a loved one could get COVID and maybe be out of commission for a little bit is a real possibility. So I think at this point, the COVID pandemic is not a force majeure event. What force majeure means basically is something that is not predictable. It's not something anyone could have foreseen coming. Well, we're in COVID-19. We are in the pandemic. We all know about it. It is not a surprise anymore. And so you are not going to be able to use that clause to cancel because of a pandemic, unless there's a new one or a different one. But what you can do is make sure that your cancellation policies or that you have just some sort of term in there in case you get sick or the venue you were planning to use for a photo shoot is not available, or you have delays in production times from another vendor or in getting supplies that you need to fulfill your side of the bargain, or same thing for the client. So just take a look at that and make sure. I think we all try to, over deliver, under promise, over deliver. This is where we really want to protect ourselves and our clients by making sure that if things come up that we could not have anticipated, that we're able to deal with it gracefully. Kind of gives everybody a little bit of an easy out or an easy way to rearrange the contract terms so that you're not holding somebody to something that they just can't really do. So take a look at your cancellation policies. Take a look and see if you've got that force majeure or act of God or impossibility term, and think about what in your specific business, what could go wrong, what could pop up. Maybe that you're not expecting, but just kind of brainstorm. Again, nobody likes to do these like worst case scenario brainstorms, but they're helpful in putting your contracts together and making sure that you're covered in case something like that comes up. So make sure, I will say, I review a lot of contracts, and you might be surprised, you might not be surprised. I am floored by how many contracts I see that just don't have a cancellation or a termination term at all. Like they just don't talk about what if somebody wants to fire the other person, or what if the project is not going well and we want to end it, or what if something happens and one of us can't fulfill our end of the bargain. There's just nothing about it. It's just silent. So if you don't have any language about that at all, now is a great time to go ahead and put that in there. Would you bring in a substitute person if it's a one-on-one service type thing? If it's an online course, would you maybe delay or extend the time period for the course? If it's maybe something you're running live and you had promised to do a weekly coaching call or something, and maybe you get sick and you just literally can't do it, would you bring in somebody else? Would you maybe say, I'm just going to extend this for another couple months so that I can fulfill what I promised? Just think through that. It's really, really important to make sure you have that in your contracts. All right, something else that is, I feel like particularly 2020, looking in your contracts, we've had a lot of clients with issues around this, is if you have an online community as either part of your membership, part of an online course, maybe just even something you do for free as a promotional tool, do you have rules around that, and what do your contracts say about that? I find that a lot of contracts, again, just like the termination provision, they just don't talk about this at all. And ideally, I recommend having at least some general terms in your contract about, how you expect people to behave if you do have some sort of online interactive area where members can talk to each other or talk to you. Do you want people, are there certain topics that are off limits? We have seen a lot of issues around the political environment in late 2020, around Black Lives Matter, around people moving towards, bringing diversity and equity into their businesses. These have been hot button topics. So if there are things that just really you don't want people to talk about, you can put those in your rules. If there are certain types of posts that are not allowed, you can put those in your rules. What I find a lot of times is people might have like very general rules, because, Facebook allows you to have rules in the Facebook platform for your Facebook group. But sometimes those aren't really mentioned in the contract, or it's not really clear. We actually just had an issue recently that we were helping a client deal with. And the person on the other side of it, it was kind of a dispute, was basically saying, yeah, I know you made me agree to those Facebook rules, but that's not a contract. So what we have started doing is actually writing into our clients' contracts that those Facebook rules are basically integrated as if they were written into the contract. So you're agreeing to them just like you're agreeing to everything else. And that if you break one of them, it's just like breaching the contract. So think about that. Think about, again, a lot of those Facebook rules get kind of set and forgotten. So take a look at your Facebook group rules, especially if you had some issues lately, or if there are things that you want to be, treat differently in light of our current situation. Take a look at those, see if they need to be updated, and make sure that your contract addresses those, that you've got something that says, you have, as part of being in this program, or as part of working with me, you have to abide by these rules. And that should also be linked to your termination provision. So you should have the right, if you're running a group and someone is not following your rules, you should have the ability to kick them out, and to do that without a refund if that's your choice. You need to say what's going to happen. So again, we want everybody to be on the same page. We want everyone to know what they're getting into, so then they can decide for themselves if they want to behave, or if they're willing to risk, getting kicked out without a refund. But it's really, really important that your contract, again, gives you, as the person running it, you are holding that space. You are protecting all the other people in there. So you really need to be able to control that by kicking people out, telling them to leave, revoking their access if they are not following the rules. So check your contract and make sure that you've got some parameters around that. All right. And then the last thing I want to talk about is just kind of the mechanics of actually getting your contracts signed during these promotions. So if you're an online business, you may have kind of an automated checkout procedure. Even if you're a one-on-one service provider, you may use a tool like Honeybook or Dubsado that, sends your contracts out for signature. So I want you to, after you've made some of these changes that we've talked about in your contract, I want you to make sure that the updated version of your terms or your contract is actually the one that buyers are seeing. So make sure you update it if you're using a CRM like Honeybook or Dubsado, make sure you upload the new one. If you are using an online checkout cart and you have them agree, check a little box at checkout, make sure that you update. If that's linked to a page on your website or something, make sure that gets refreshed with the new version. And then you want to make sure, I want you to kind of walk through your own checkout procedure. Make sure that your buyers can actually read your terms or your contract before they pay, ideally. So if it's linked at checkout, click the link, make sure it works. Make sure that page is active on your website. If it's through your CRM, go through the process. Make sure that they're getting what you think they're supposed to be getting. But it's really, really important that you give people the opportunity to read the terms or the contract before they agree. This is one of those areas where I want you to consider if you, had a dispute, had a disagreement with a client or a customer, you had to go up in front of Judge Judy, they're unhappy, you're unhappy, and you're trying to figure out what did we agree to at the beginning. If you have some terms that they never even got to see before they purchased, or maybe you sent them to them after the fact, that's not looking great for the Judge Judy. She's not going to be real happy with that. I don't think she's going to think that your customer actually agreed to those terms because they didn't get to see them. And maybe they never even did anything to tell you, yes, I agree to these terms. So 2 really important things. 1, make sure they can read them before they pay, ideally. I know some of you do sales over the phone, which I'm not a huge fan of legally. So if you are like taking a credit card over the phone, I want you to consider having a second step as part of your onboarding or as part of some sort of when you're getting people into the program where they are taking an affirmative action to read the terms. And they have the opportunity to read them before they have to take that affirmative action that says, yes, I agree. And that you refund them if they read them and they're not happy with them. I think that's really important. If you're doing a sale over the phone, that people have a chance to read what they're agreeing to, even if they're, you're taking a deposit or something over the phone, that they still have a chance to read them, digest them, think about them, take them to a lawyer if they need to, especially for a higher ticket investment type program. So we want them to read them before they agree, and then we want some sort of affirmative action where they either click a button that says, yes, I agree, or you've got really clear language at checkout that says, by clicking purchase, you're agreeing to these terms. Here's an example. I actually pulled this from one of our templates of some language. So by clicking on the box when signing up for the program, you are providing the electronic equivalent of your signature and assert that you have read, understood, and agreed to this entire document. If you do not agree with these terms of use, do not purchase or use the program or content. So ideally, someone should not get into your program if they're not agreeing to the terms. It should be kind of a take it or leave it. You really don't want to be having students or clients that you don't have an agreement with working, or part of your program. All right, so we are getting our terms agreed to. If you are working one-on-one, maybe you're using an electronic signature platform. That's awesome. Those are easy and great. I hope none of you are just emailing documents and asking them to sign and send them back. That is the slowest and most difficult way. There's tons of good options about making sure that you get your contract signed. All right, 2 more things that I want to touch on with contracts before we wrap up, getting you ready to launch and promote your new offer or your existing offers. And that is, these are 2 things that may come into play as you're working on your launch. If you are using affiliates or referral partners, anyone who's helping you promote your item or your services, I highly recommend that you have an affiliate agreement with them. So again, I'm a lawyer. I want everything in writing. I want us all to be really clear about what we're agreeing to do, how we're getting paid, it rules around how you can use my intellectual property, my trademarks, my copyrights as you're promoting my stuff. It is so much, it goes so much more smoothly if you've got that all in writing. If you have questions later, you just refer back to it. It's very easy. When do I get paid? Is it a 30-day delay? Is there a waiting period for refunds? What happens if I breach this agreement? Could I lose my commissions? All of that stuff needs to be in your affiliate agreement. And so, of course, we have a template for this in our online store at awbfirm.com. If you don't already have one, just go grab it. This is not something you should be trying to create from scratch. There is very specific terms that you want to consider having in there, and you want it to fit your affiliate program rather than maybe borrowing somebody else's. So I want you to have a good agreement with any affiliates who are helping you promote your stuff. Anytime money is changing hands, I think it's really important to have an agreement. So then the second thing that comes into play during the launch is you may be pulling in additional people to your team to help. So maybe you hire a copywriter to do some sales emails for you, or a sales page on your website. Maybe you hire a launch strategist. Maybe you're doing special videos, or you have special images or graphics created. There's all kinds of parts and pieces that can go into a launch or a promotion. So I want you to make sure that you're using an agreement with all of those contractors. Now, if you're working with an agency or a more established freelancer that has lots of clients, they may have their own agreement that they send to you and ask you to sign. That's very common, but not all will. So if they don't, or if you just maybe would prefer to have the same terms across the board with all of your contractors, I would recommend that you put in place your own independent contractor agreement. Again, we have templates for this. It is something where you'll want to do a little research on the state law to make sure. There are some states where it's really hard to use contractors, California being the biggest one. So this is an area where getting some legal advice, especially if it's a contractor that's going to work a little more long-term in your business. Typically, if you're just bringing in a contractor for a very discrete project like a launch, that is typically going to pass the independent contractor test. Now, there's lots of other factors, but especially if they have other clients, they're working on other projects, they have a real business. These are some of the things we look at. I'm not giving an exhaustive list of all the independent contractor factors to make sure you're treating them the right way. But typically the kinds of contractors you're going to bring in for a launch are going to meet those elements. But we still want to look at them, make sure we're doing it the right way. And we definitely want to have an agreement with them. So the agreement goes a long way. It can't override. If you're calling someone a contractor who really should be an employee, it's not going to override that, but it's good evidence. Again, if we're going in front of Judge Judy, we're trying to say this person really was a contractor, having an independent contractor agreement is helpful. And you also want to cover all of the same things we talked about with affiliates. Who's getting paid when? What are they doing for you? And then the most important thing, in my opinion, because I'm an intellectual property attorney and I'm always thinking about this, is who owns the rights to whatever they're creating. So if you're hiring a videographer, the default rule in the United States, if you don't have anything in writing, if you just hire a friend, say, come do my videos for me in my garage, your friend is going to own all the copyrights in those videos. I know it seems backwards. It's bananas, but that is how our law is set up. If they are an independent contractor rather than an employee, they own all the rights. That's how the law is set up. You can change that, but it has to be in writing. And so this is a really important element to have in your independent contractor agreements, because at the end of the day, my guess is you as the business owner want to own all that content, especially if it's something that's in your course that you're actually monetizing and selling. You want to make sure that you own all of that so that you can protect it and you have the rights to make money from it, and not have somebody come back later if they're unhappy with you and tell you you can't use it. That is a nightmare scenario. So we want to have an affiliate agreement in place, and we want to have agreements with all of our independent contractors who we might be bringing in to help us with our launch or help us with our promotion. All right, that wraps up getting ready for your end of 2020 or beginning of 2021 launch. I have had a lot of fun with this series and am excited to be shifting next week and in coming weeks to some year-end podcast episodes. So we're going to be talking about what do you need to be doing now to kind of prepare for your 2021 goals, depending on what you've got coming up. We are going to be talking about the challenge that we have coming up, which you may have heard about earlier in this episode. And we're going to have some behind the scenes and maybe some trend watching. So stay tuned. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast, hit the subscribe button, and be sure to check out our website for all the show notes for this episode and all the other episodes. awbfirm.com/podcast is where you find all of those. And I will see you guys soon. Have a great rest of your week.